Good morning, guys. Tony Maritato here, licensed physical therapist. And in today's video, I want to take a look behind me on the screen at the APTA Physical Therapy Evaluation Reference Table. So I want to go through the three variations of the physical therapy evaluation from low to moderate to high complexity. We'll talk about what's required for billing each of those three CPT codes and maybe why we need to consider what it is that we're actually doing when creating a physical therapy evaluation. So let's take a look starting from the top, and I'll put a link to this resource down in the video description. Of course, we have the AMA CPT code 97161, 162, and 163. How to use this guide. APTA has an amazing batch of resources. This is absolutely one of my favorite. It's broken down into several sections. Let's just jump into it. So looking at 97161, low or minimum complexity physical therapy evaluation. There are no personal factors or comorbidities when we're performing this level of evaluation. Now, it doesn't mean that those comorbidities doesn't necessarily exist. What it means is that we're not evaluating those comorbidities. So if I have a patient who's been referred to me for right shoulder pain, insidious onset, no history of traumatic tissue damage, and they're looking for a one-time visit home exercise program, I'm probably not going to dive deep into other unrelated complexities or comorbidities because it's just a one-time plan of care. Whereas if I'm doing something more involved, we're going to dive deep into many of the other factors, and we'll talk about that with the other CPT codes. In terms of the evaluation, the examination component. So examination of body systems, we're looking at examining 1 to 2 elements for the minimum complexity evaluation. That could be strength, it could be range of motion, it could be specific functional activities. Referencing my patient with the shoulder pain, maybe they're unable to reach above their head to place an item on a shelf, and maybe their strength is a 2 out of 5 manual muscle test. But the idea here is we're looking at 1 to 2 elements for the physical examination. Clinical presentation for a minimum complexity eval is a stable presentation. They've had the same symptoms. They're not changing. They're not getting better. They're not getting worse. They're just persisting where they are. And of course, a low level of clinical decision-making for the complexity. So it's very simple. If somebody presents to me with a very clean case history, very obvious, no red flags, and a simple kind of diagnosis, I don't need to go into 50 special tests. I don't need to go into all of these different functional outcome measures. It's a low complexity evaluation. And right now, 2023, Medicare is still reimbursing the same amount, whether we're doing low, moderate, or high complexity evaluations. There is no difference in the pricing reimbursement. So going back up to the top, moderate complexity, we're looking at 1 to 2 personal factors. We're looking at 3 or more elements in the examination. We're looking at an evolving presentation, meaning potentially the symptoms are getting worse, potentially the functional limitations are increasing, the impairments are increasing. And we're looking at kind of a moderate level of complexity. So maybe we're taking psychosocial factors into account. Maybe we're taking living environment and support systems into account, lifestyle factors. Finally, for a high complexity physical therapy evaluation, CPT code 97161, we're looking at 3 or more personal factors and comorbidities. We're looking at examining 4 or more body systems or functional limitations. We're looking at an unstable clinical presentation, and this is always the most challenging. This might be a scenario where the therapist has to monitor vital signs. Maybe you're looking at blood pressure, respiratory rate. Maybe you're looking at oxygen saturation levels. This is a truly unstable case that absolutely requires the skills of a therapist to deliver the patient care experience. This, looks at much more complex decision-making. Maybe we're including information from other healthcare providers across other systems. The face-to-face time, it should be noted that these are all 3 untimed codes. And when you research Medicare Medicare's description of how to handle an untimed code. These minutes should not be accounted for toward timed code treatment minutes. The APTA makes recommendations of 20, 30, 45 minutes of face-to-face time. We know that there is a face-to-face element based on the CPT code definition, but I have to stress the importance that these are untimed codes. So familiarize yourself with the Medicare definition. And in fact, I've got an LCD, I've got an article with information about this. I'll post it also in the description of this video. Familiarize yourself with the AMA guidelines because they're the ones setting the definition of the CPT code before you find yourself making decisions that aren't held up by published guidelines. This is a great little section. I won't waste your time going through it, but this talks about the definitions, like what is activity limitations. You know, difficulties in an individual may have in executing a task, action, or activities. For example, ability to perform a task due to abnormal vital signs. Remember, we talked about high complexity might require you monitor vital signs because the patient might be at a legitimate risk of, you know, a cardiac event or a stroke or a seizure. Whereas a minimum complexity evaluation, you're not monitoring vitals. The vitals are stable. There's no reason, there's no indication for you to monitor those vitals. So anyway, those are great definitions. I highly encourage you, even if you think you know what the definition of this terminology is, I would encourage you to go ahead and research it. And if you have other questions, please don't hesitate. Let me know. Put your questions down in the comments below this video. If you haven't already subscribed to ChoosePTFirst.com website, YouTube channel, social media presence, go check us out. Thanks for watching.